Hey everyone, welcome back to Mode Bespoke. I'm Atenas. For today's pattern, we are going to be working on this super cute, chunky crochet hat. So let's get started. So here's our finished hat. This is what it will look like once we've added our poof and we're completely done. I used the Tunisian Crochet brim for this. You can use the ribbed brim. So if you're interested in the Tunisian brim, I'll link it somewhere up here. That way you can find the video tutorial for it. The pattern for this is also available on the website. That's modebespoke.com. It is free for this for the brims. So go on there, you can check it out. I also have photos of the different projects I've used these brims on, just so you can get ideas and see what it looks like once it's on a completed project. So go check that out. I'll put the link in the description box below. There's also the video tutorials for these. As far as sizing goes, you can make this for any size you want. This one is a bit chunky because I used a size 6 yarn, so it's a bit chunky. So it is nice and thick for winter. The sizing chart is also going to be available on the website. I will link that down below. It'll be the listing for the pattern for this. However, the sizing chart is on there for free. So just check on the link. It's up there. You don't have to purchase the pattern to get the sizing chart. And the sizing chart's also available for the brim too. So you'll see that. But you can make the hat height however you want. I have a few suggested sizings on there. You can also make this as a slouch hat. It is chunky, so it will be a very heavy slouchy hat, so just, keep that in mind. This is reversible if you choose to make it a reversible hat. I sewed this on because this is the side that I like best. However, if you flip it over, this is what your stitching looks like on the inside. So it's gorgeous stitching on the inside as well. So just pick whichever side you like best, or use a detachable poof, and you can wear your hat that way. But we're going to work on this today. So get your brim ready, whether it is the ribbed brim. So if you want to make the ribbed brim, I'll link that up here. This one's the easier of the two. So if you're a beginner, go with this one. I used a medium-sized yarn for the brim. So this is chunky, this is medium. I used a 6mm hook for the brim, and it's a size 4 yarn. You can use whatever you want. You can use a size 3, you can use a larger yarn, whichever you want. If you're going to do the Tunisian brim, I do suggest you use a smaller yarn, so 4 being the highest size you could go. If you're going to do this one, you can use a slightly chunkier yarn. It'll work a little bit better, so you can use anywhere medium to a slightly chunky. Doesn't matter, you can just pick whichever yarn you want. Test it out before you try to commit to completing the whole project, just in case you don't like it. So decide which of the two sides you want as the outside of your hat, and then we're going to start to crochet on that side. So I decided I want to try this side for the outside this time, so that way I can show you the difference between the two hats here when we are done. But leave a nice long tail end of yarn. Now let's zoom in here and pick any stitch, and we're going to work into these little spaces down here. So don't work into the top part of the stitch, which is where you would normally work. You're going to work into these bottom stitches right here. And we're going to work into every other stitch of the row. So insert your hook into any stitch, leave a nice long tail end of yarn, and pull a loop through that stitch. Now drop this tail end of yarn. We will weave that in later, and we're going to chain 1. So to chain 1, you're going to wrap your yarn around your hook, so yarn over, pull this loop through this bottom loop for 1. And now you're going to skip a stitch, go to the next stitch, and we're going to single crochet. So insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. You're going to have 2 loops on your hook, and now you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops. Skip the next stitch, go to the one after that, and single crochet. Go, we'll do one more together. Skip a stitch and go into the next one. Insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. Continue to single crochet into every other stitch on the top of the brim until you get to this side. So once you've worked your way around, this row could have ended in one of 2 ways. Either you had 1 stitch and then you're ready to go, or you had 2 stitches. If you have 2 stitches, see, I only have the 1, but moving this one over. If you have 2 stitches, just skip 1 and work a single crochet, even if it's right next to this one. That's okay. You can go ahead and just work that stitch, and then we'll continue working the rest of the row. Because we're going to be working a continuous round, you won't be able to tell. So if you work the round is in one row and then chain 1, work the next row, chain 1, work the next row, it would be highly visible. But we're working in the continuous round, so don't worry, you won't be able to see it. So now, moving on, I've already done my single crochet. I just have to chain 1, skip 1, and I'm ready to work on my next stitch. So I'm going to work into this chain. So it's that very first chain that we did at the beginning of the row. I'm going to work a single crochet here, and I'm going to chain 1. And now, this very first chain space. So here's the single crochet. Here's a chain space on either side. I'm going to work into this very first chain space, but I'm going to work in the back loop. So see, there are 2 loops that make up this stitch. So here's the front loop and here's the back loop. You're going to work into the back loop only. So insert your hook in through the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and single crochet. Chain 1. Go into the next chain space. Insert your hook into that back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and single crochet. Chain 1. So it's basically a repetition of what we did in this first row, only now you have this chain space. So instead of skipping the stitch every time, you're going to skip that single crochet. You're going to work into the back loop of the chain space. So that's all you do for this row. Just continue working back loop, single crochet into each chain space until you work your way to this stitch. I'll see you again when you get here. Alright, so you've made it around, and now we're ready to work what would be the third row, or I guess the second one of the design. And this is going to be the stitch, or this is going to be the way you're going to work the rest of the hat. So I've got this stitch right here, which is that chain space. So we're just going to do a chain 1. We're going to work into this back loop right there. You're going to work a single crochet. And now we chain 1. And here's what we're going to do for the rest of the hat. You're going to go into the chain spaces. That's where you're going to work into, but instead of working at the top, you're going to work down here. So you see this chain space? You're working in the stitch down here, and you're working the back loop only. So if you turn your work to the side, you're always going to see a front loop and a back loop. It's no different for this bottom stitch. You're going to work only the back loop. So going into that next chain space, so we skip that single crochet. Here's the chain space. We're going to go into that bottom back loop. So insert your hook through the back loop only, yarn over, and you're going to pull up a loop. And leave this nice and loose. And then just single crochet. Chain 1. Skip the single crochet and go into that chain space. Work into the back loop only, so this bottom one. And chain 1. Go into the next stitch. Go into that chain 1, so down here, so here's that chain space. Work into the back loop only. Pull up a loop and single crochet. Chain 1. Go to the chain space, work into the back loop only, and single crochet. And that's all there's to it. For the rest of the hat, you're just going to continue this same pattern. So now you don't have to worry about the beginning of the row anymore. So it's going to start to be hidden by the end of this row. So once you get back around, you might not even notice that you've begun a new round because you're just going to start working into that bottom chain space. So keep repeating this same pattern until you get to the hat height that you want. So let me zoom out. So depending on the type of hat that you want and what size you're making it, I did list the sizing chart. It is available on the website along with the written pattern. So if you want the written pattern for this, it is available for purchase on the website. The sizing chart, however, is free, so go check that out. I'll put the listing down below. You'll be able to find the sizing that you need for any of the hats. I do have a couple suggestions for hat height. If you want a slouch hat, like I said, this is a very heavy yarn, so if you're going to do a slouch hat, I would use a smaller yarn than this, so maybe a light or a medium size yarn. That way you can have a nice lightweight slouchy and it won't fall off your head, because this is quite heavy, and then if you add a poof to it, it won't stay on your head. So keep that in mind, but that's all there's to that. I'll keep working on this hat until I get to, until I finish the hat height that I want, and then I'll show you how to cinch the top. Because I do cinch the top, we're not going to do any decreases here. So this is a cinched top. It's going to give us a lot of space up at the top, and it's going to leave our design nice and even. So it'll be a nice clean pattern all the way to the top. If you do decide to do any decreases, since I'm not doing any on this pattern, go ahead and share with us what it is that you did. I didn't even try working a decrease for this because I wanted this to be a cinched pattern. So if you want to, let me know down in the comments below how it is that you did it in case somebody else is interested, and then I'll just pin your comment and we can share for everybody else who's wondering, because I do get a lot of questions. I like to do the cinched top. I think it's just easier to work with, and it's easier to sew a poof to the top of a cinched hat, at least in my opinion it is. It also makes a really nice little star shape whenever you're doing a slouchy beanie and you don't want a poof. So that's why I usually do a cinched top. But again, if you decide to do a decrease, just let us know what you did, at what point you started decreasing, or what stitch you used to decrease. I'd love to share that with everybody else. So I'll keep working on this. I will see you again when I finish the hat height, and then I'll show you how to cinch the top. So once you have completed the hat height that you want, you are ready to cinch the top. So we're going to work right up here. Be sure to leave some of this yarn. It makes it a lot easier to sew with, and it also makes an invisible seam. So let me zoom in and we'll get to it. So I ended on a single crochet, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chain one. And then I'm going to pull out my hook and my yarn, and that's going to make a small knot down here. So as I tighten this up, it's going to knot up this little space. And then we're just going to be ready to sew now. So you are going to need a yarn needle for this. So if you're using this super bulky yarn, just get a big wide needle that you can fit your yarn through. If you don't have one, let me pull this through here first. If you don't have one, you can use your hook. So you just insert your hook in one direction and grab some yarn, pull that through, and then grab your hook and go in the opposite direction, grab some yarn and pull all the way through. But you'd be pulling the yarn completely through. You'd be essentially using your crochet hook to sew. I do recommend that you get a yarn needle though if you don't already have one. It does make it a lot easier to weave in your ends. Alright, so starting here at the top, I'm just going to work in these little chain spaces. So I'm inserting my needle from the back towards the front, and I'm just going to stitch here. Now in the next chain space, I'm going to insert my needle from front to back. We're going to go into the next chain space, go back to front. So just pay attention to where your yarn is coming out from. I go into the next stitch, and then go front to back. So just keep sewing this way, because as you pull it, it'll start to close the top of your hat. Now, for those of you that have purchased the PDF pattern, I did make an additional row of single crochet. So I single crocheted in every stitch, which is something I didn't show here in the tutorial. Because this particular skein of yarn, some of these special color yarns, have a little less yarn than just a plain color one. I think it was like 25 yards or something like that less. I don't know, it was a little bit less. So I'm just gonna sew here at the top without doing that last row of single crochets. The chain spaces are not going to be highly visible, so you should be okay whether or not you decide to do one last row of single crochets. But I'm going to keep on sewing here. I'm going to show you what it looks like as you start to tighten up the top of your hat. This is what it's going to look like. Keep sewing all the way around, and once you get there, just tighten up the top part of your hat. So pull the yarn as tightly as you can to close the top. Now you're just going to sew across on both sides, and this will help keep your hat closed, especially if you are living somewhere where it's really cold. You don't want any of that cold air coming in from the top of the hat. So I'm just going to stitch across a few times, and I'll just keep you with me here while we sew, just so you can see how I'm doing this. And if you notice, I'm just going in the center and between the little I guess the little corners. This one isn't quite a star. Most of the time when I cinch hats the top, it looks like a star. This one's a really thick and bulky yarn, so it didn't quite star up at the top. So here we go. Once you are done, give it a good knot here at the top. And again, since this is a really bulky yarn, I can't sew too much along the top. If you're using a medium yarn, you may have to go around a few more times just to make sure that your hat is completely closed. So that's normally what I do when I use the fingering yarn or a medium yarn for my hats. There you go. And then once you're done, you're going to go through and weave in all of your ends. If you don't know how to weave in your ends, look somewhere up here at the top of the video. I'm going to link the video tutorial for how to weave in ends. Go through, weave in the top end, the bottom end of your yarn, and then we can add our poof. So once you have finished your hat, you've woven in all your ends. Now I can show you what I was doing that was a little bit different. So if you remember at the beginning of the video, I flipped my brim, sorry, I wanted to call it an elastic. I flipped my brim inside out so that I could crochet it differently. And here's why. So here's the original one where I did the Tunisian one on the outside. This is the reverse side. So here's the right side. And then I did all of the stitching. I did the same on this one. But what I wanted was the stitching on the inside to be on the outside of the hat. Sorry, I just pinned the poof on there because I wasn't sure if this is the color I want for it yet. But so this is what I want it to look on the outside. So the stitch is slightly different. So whereas this one is in straight rows, this one is a bit more diagonal. So the stitching just kind of goes diagonally. I don't know if you can see it too much with all of the tweed color, but so here it is on the pink. And if I flip this one inside out, this is what that looks like. So this is what I want it to be on the outside, and that's the inside of the stitch. So as you were crocheting, this is what it looked like right in front of you. This is the inside part. So that's the difference. Now you can figure out which way you want your elastic to go and which stitching you want on the outside. And if it doesn't matter to you, and you just want to make it a little bit longer, and then you can flip the brim inside out, you can always do that too. So there you go. So that's what I've got for you guys today. Don't forget to swing by the website to purchase your copy of the Chunky Hat PDF pattern. It is an instant download, so you'll be able to get that pattern immediately and start working on your crochet hat right away. If you have any questions on the pattern or here on the tutorial, go ahead and leave it either on the comment section below, or you can always email me. My contact info is in the description box below. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. I do post videos every week, so do hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. Don't forget to like and share if you enjoyed it, and I will see you all again next week.